China has been doubling down on its threats against the U.S. over the tariffs. I mean, it looks like we're in the midst of a pretty hot trade war. Now, what they're doing is they're taking aim at other nations. On Monday, a spokesman for the Chinese Ministry of Commerce warned other countries to avoid making trade deals at the expense of China's interest. If they do, China will, quote, take countermeasures in a resolute and reciprocal manner, end quote. So what can we draw from China's latest threats? And is this an indication that President Trump's tariffs are working? Well, here to discuss this, Asian expert Gordon Chang, Distinguished Senior Fellow at Gatestone Institute and author of several books on China and Chinese-U.S. relations, including his most recent, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. You can follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Tony.
All right, saber rattling, what do we make of this?
Well, I think it is saber rattling, and I think it is an indication that the Chinese are very worried that President Trump will reorder the global trading system. Because we've got the world's largest market, we got a lot of leverage in our discussions with the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Vietnamese, Europeans, Italians. And so I think China is worried about being left out in the cold. So therefore, they're making threats against trade partners. Now, I don't think it's going to work because China is the trade surplus country in the world. Last year, its global trade surplus was $992.2 billion. So that means that there are a lot of reasons why countries around the world want to deal with us because we're a trade deficit country. We got the world's largest market. I think China's getting a little bit worried right now.
So what does that look like, these threats that they're making, these countermeasures to other countries? I mean, what could they do to them?
They can do minor things, but ultimately a trade surplus country is very just out of ammunition. And we can see that in our trade relations with what China's been saying to us recently. Like the embargo on rare earths really is more symbolic than anything else. China tried that in 2010 against Japan, and the embargo collapsed in a couple months. The Japanese found ways around it. We're doing the same things. Even Boeing, that's a really hollow threat. Just because of the way the global airplane market works, you have backlogs of years and years and years. There's only so much production in the world. Whatever China doesn't buy from Boeing, Boeing will be able to sell to Airbus's customers who are not going to wait for 10 years to get an Airbus. Because, Airbus sells to China, it can't sell to somebody else. We'll sell to the somebody else. So there's a lot of things that China's been huffing and puffing recently, but they really hurt China as much or more than it hurts us.
So let's talk about the adjusting of this trade imbalance. Is China, they're as you said, they're the ones people are buying from. They're not necessarily buying from others. So, they don't want to hurt their customers. I mean, that doesn't make sense. Could this cause others that have manufacturing capacity to increase that capacity to step in if China goes too far?
I think yes. And clearly, countries around the world are worried about their own manufacturing, just as President Trump is worried about the state of the American manufacturing sector. So this is a global concern. I think countries around the world have had enough. They've got to protect themselves, and they are now starting to impose tariffs. So, for instance, India just a day ago slapped 12% tariffs on Chinese steel, or steel in general. But that was really to prevent China from selling to India what it couldn't sell to the United States. And I think we're going to see this around the world as countries protect their local markets from what they anticipate to be a flood of Chinese goods.
So in part, help me understand what China is doing at the bottom level here is that by threatening these other countries, are they trying to keep these other countries from striking trade deals from the U.S. to step in and provide some of the product that we're getting from China now, which would then lock China out in the future possibly?
That's exactly what China's worried about. Because the trade deals that President Trump is trying to put together probably do a couple of things. But one of them is it makes it more difficult for those countries to trade with China, removes the incentives to do that. And so China is worried that it will not it'll be locked out of markets, or that their access to other markets will be reduced. So China is, I think, right now realizing that it's got to try to intimidate others not to do these deals with the U.S., or not to do deals with the U.S. with provisions of the type I just talked about. So this is now a struggle between Washington and Beijing. You know, we just heard from Treasury Secretary Bessent, or at least we've heard reports that Bessent is saying that there will be a de-escalation of the trade war. I think that's a little bit premature, because we're not seeing Xi Jinping bending right now. And that's what's absolutely necessary for China to be more accommodating, not only with the United States, but with other countries around the world.
So what would have been gained if we stopped right now? If the Trump administration said, all right, truce, nothing else? Well, I mean, what would have been gained? Anything?
I don't think anything would be gained, because, as Bessent mentioned, negotiations with China over a trade deal are going to be a slog, is the term we've been hearing last few hours. And that's certainly true. China is not going to make commitments, and we've seen this in other trade deals, where it takes them a very long time to come around. And I think that's the case now, especially because apparently Bessent talked about structural changes in China to increase the consumption sector of the Chinese economy. That's something Xi Jinping has been extremely reluctant to do. Yes, they'll make rhetorical flourishes that they'll do it, but they have not made changes. And matter of fact, consumption share of the Chinese economy, now about 38%, has been declining in recent years, not increasing. So what Bessent wants to do with the Chinese economy is extremely hard, and probably impossible as long as Xi Jinping is in charge.
All right, just about a minute, just a little less than a minute left. Long slog. I mean, what are we talking about? Is that a year, 2 years? I mean, how long of a process is that?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that, but it could very well be a year, especially because we're seeing renegotiation of trade relationships around the world, which means that there are only so many Treasury negotiators, which means that we're going to be prioritizing trade agreements with our friends. We just saw the vice president announce in India, where he is, that there's new trade guidelines have been agreed with New Delhi. That's great news for the U.S.
Well, yes, maybe. We'll talk about that another day. Gordon, thanks for joining us. Always good to hear you.
Thank you so much, Tony.